Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Climate and Environment Subcommittee meeting on the 4th of April. Is that an echo?
Yeah, it was just, the mic was open there.
Oh, yes, so all good. And thank you to staff for who are here today and those who are supporting this meeting. So I would like to ask him to start with our council blessing, please.
Kia ora tātou. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana I ngā take kei mua I a mātou aroaro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau māhara hua pai mō ngā hāpuri e mahi nei mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou, katoa kia whaihua, kia tōtika tā mātou mahi. Mā te maia, te tiro whakamua me te hihiri, ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha.
Thank you very much, Kim. So we'll now move on to item 3, which is apologies. We have Councillor Cooper, who is on leave. Just so that people know, we have no one online. So now we'll move on to item 4, which is declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda. So I'm asking if there are any declarations of interest from members of this committee. Thank you, there are none. So now I'll move on to item 5, which is public speaking time relating to items on the agenda. I haven't been notified of any public speakers, so there are none to that either. So now we're on to item 6, which is also going to go very quickly, which is delegations, and none have been registered. So now we're actually up to item 7. So that's leave of absence. So you can either indicate to me whether you have a leave of absence or go to the Mayor's office with your applications. Matters of an urgent nature, I haven't had any brought to my attention as well, so there are none of those either. Right, so now we're up to 8.1, our updates, 8.1. So I'd like to invite Simon Scott to come forward to speak to an update on our climate change and resilience and our environment strategies, and Chris Purvan, and to Gina. Thank you. She might need another chair. Unless... Oh, Doug as well.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay, all good. So this, the report is on page 6 of our agenda. So shall I take, so Chris, would you like to introduce this?
Yes, thank you. Really, this is a follow-up, I think, on a conversation we had at last Climate Environment Subcommittee, really just to formalise a shift in our approach, I'm going to say it, for our climate change and resilience strategy and our environment strategy. I will just highlight to you that we have met with our, I'll say our established now, it's not new, climate change and resilience think tank, and off the back of some feedback from them around the importance of making sure our mana whenua representatives are with us and are able to join us and give input and feedback, and also that we've got several processes underway that are working, I guess, concurrently with the development of strategies, and two I'll mention is Takutai Kapiti and the Whaitua process. So Takutai Kapiti has links into the climate change and resilience strategy around adaptation and many other things. And the Whaitua has got, or is conceivably got, significant influence for the environment strategy. So the advice that has come back to us is that it would be good to fold those three things into our strategies before we push forward to engage the community. And that's really what this update is about. So we just wanted to make sure that we'd close the loop to come back to explain that and then to take any questions that anyone has around that shift in timing.
Thank you, Chris. Would any other staff members like to add anything to that? Thank you. So I will ask if there are any questions on this matter. Thank you. So then you'll note on page 6 that there are 3 recommendations. Do I have a mover for those recommendations? Sorry, 4 of them on page 6. Do I have a mover for those recommendations? And a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Coe and Councillor Warwick. Any discussion on these matters? So I will put all those recommendations to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Those against? The motion is passed, or the recommendations are passed. Thank you.
Quickest paper ever.
Yes. So thank you, staff. We actually have on my little timetable here that we are going to adjourn for 5 minutes for morning tea, but I think we will keep on pushing on. Okay, so item 8 is the Wellington Regional Waste Management and Minimisation Plan. So if I could invite Robbie to speak to, and I think he's going to be supported by Councillor Halliday. What's that guy's name?
Morning, everyone. Sorry, it's a bit hard for me to move up the front, so I'll just sit down the back here.
That's perfectly fine, thank you, Robbie.
So these updates that I've shared with CES today were shared to the Joint Committee earlier this year. So the Joint Committee oversees the development and implementation of the WMMP. There's a representative from each council. Councillor Halliday is currently our representative on the Joint Committee. Just to recap, Kapiti Council adopted the WMMP in December last year, right before the break. The last council of the region adopted in February, so it's been adopted by all 8 councils. So we're moving into implementation planning. So that includes baselines of targets and a regional work program. This will be presented to the Joint Committee in June. So the updates in this paper cover the last quarter of last year. So it's updates from the regional work program and 8 individual councils. I'll jump into Kapiti's updates, but then if there's any questions about any of the other projects, we can get into those afterwards. So those updates covered the waste levy grants. Last year was the most interest in applications that we've ever received, so it was about 3 times over allocated. Since these updates, the grants have all been paid out, and we're now following up and working with the applicants. We've just wrapped up a busy event season, so we had 13 waste minimisation plans submitted to us for events over 1,000 people. So these were reviewed, resources were lent out, including the bin hoods and waste audit kits. So we had waste audits, post-event waste audits provided by all 13 events. Love Your Compost is ongoing. The battery recycling has now been underway for a good time at the Parapara Umu Library. Last month we rolled it out to Otaki as well. What should we jump into next? So we're progressing biosolid composting trials. There's a bit of work going on around the region for that, so we're looking at our local options as well as partnering with Hutt City Council to look at a few options for that. We were given approval from Atiawa to undertake a cultural impact assessment before we make any plans, any promises, so that has been drafted and should be underway pretty soon. Cool, so some of the bigger items in here, so we're looking at construction and waste minimisation plans for C and D. So that's working with developers to provide a waste minimisation plan before their project, so how they're going to manage waste during the construction. Regionally, there's a threshold in the bylaw that requires this, but that hasn't been implemented to date. So Hutt City Council are also leading the implementation of that. So what that looks like, we sort of don't really know, but that is something that we're prioritising and may be a service provided by the Zero Waste Hub. So that's our largest update. So the Otahonga Zero Waste Hub, since this, there's been a site manager hired, so a full-time site manager working at the Zero Waste Hub. Construction is 95% completed. It's unofficially open behind the scenes, so that's Ben Wakefield is the site manager who's leading networking with developers, and we're looking at whether that site would offer this service for construction waste minimisation plans for our developers. We presented at the Developers Forum last week. Yeah, so just a bit of a soft launch. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, gearing up for a big public launch sometime in the next few months. Yeah, so that's some really quick updates, but if there's anything specifically, any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Thank you, Robbie. I'd also like to acknowledge David, who's also working in this team and involved in this work as well. So, is it Simon? Where's Simon Black had his question?
We've swapped places.
Oh,
Sorry.
actually, I can't even see where the light is. Okay. I couldn't see your light behind the Christian. Thank you.
Sorry about the confusion, Madam Chair. My question is about the biosolids composting. Has whatever's being looked at for that, is there a positive or a neutral emissions impact on that? Because our dried biosolids going to the landfill does have, I think, has an emissions component. Mr. Mallon will know about that, I know.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. On paper, because a landfill has gas capture, there's actually not, so the emissions actually from biosolid disposal could potentially, on paper, under the current structure, look worse than composting. I guess what that doesn't really account for the fact that landfills don't really want it, that there are serious issues around landfill capacity as well as odours of it within landfill. So initially, under the current sort of climate reporting, is that you do lose that gas capture. So in theory, your emissions do increase initially, but that's all things that we're looking into, seeing what the impacts of that would be. I just say that the wider benefits of keeping those nutrients for one, saving landfill space. So the actual emissions from, if it is, for example, open air composting of biosolids, those emissions aren't actually calculated at the moment. Yeah, interesting question.
So thank you. Any further questions? So I have a question, and so actually no, Kim, we'll go to Kim first.
Kia ora. Just a last minute one. It's about, have you heard of an organisation called Parekore, who is the Māori national leader in this stuff? And so they've done some work down in Otaki, and I wonder if we might be able to tap into what they're doing existing as well. That was my only question.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Takawa Rob has already met Ben Wakefield at the Zero Waste Hub. Parekore has just kind of ticked over quietly in the background. It's something we've funded for a while, but we are trying to work with them a bit more just to make sure, get a bit more involved in what they're doing, a bit more oversight. But yeah, he's already working with the Zero Waste Hub, which is awesome to see.
Thank you, Kim. So I think it's great that we now have got a regional plan, and specifically in Kapiti that we have got some initiatives that are going on. So I'm just wondering, as this committee, as a council and as councillors, what can we do to support our initiatives?
One thing from me is making sure that I do bring these updates back from the Joint Committee, so we'll follow up in June with the implementation plan. There will be much more opportunities. The Zero Waste Hub has been a big job behind the scenes, so it's sort of been, quietly ticking over. But now that there's someone working there, that would really sort of be the centre of our, community waste minimisation, as well as all the other benefits that this organisation will bring with them, which we haven't really mentioned yet. So there will be, lots of opportunities centred around the Zero Waste Hub for much more involvement from council and the community in waste minimisation. That's the plan.
Thank you. Councillor Halliday, and I have to say Councillor Halliday along with Robbie have been the two main drivers of having the Kapiti voice heard in this regional forum in Wellington, so I appreciate the work of both of you in this space.
Our pleasure. I just thought I'd make a couple of comments if that's okay with the Chair in regards to where we've been so far. So we are moving into the implementation stage. The Zero Waste Centre, I think, is going to be a huge asset to our area. It's also going to be great with regards to awareness and helping to change mindsets from an education perspective. And I think that really excites the team with regards to we're basically trying to get that message across to our general community. So it's going to be a fantastic resource. And great to see Ben from Kaibosh, who's obviously very well connected in our community. And I think that's been a great coup having him come in as a site manager as such. Just remembering that waste is a resource. So it's looking at changing that mindset with regards to rather than just sticking it in the ground, that we are looking at it as a resource and how we can capitalise on that. And even from the perspective of biosolids, looking at, the wording, the nutrients, trying to capture the nutrients aspect of those sorts of things. I think wording is very, very important in this space. I did want to just talk to the linkage between this piece of work and where it sits, and it sits sort of in the climate context at the moment. And the concern has been that the messaging gets lost in that climate conversation. Personally, I think we're about to get a bit of a hammering in the climate space through the long-term plan process. So something with regards to just consideration is from a sustainability perspective, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in this space. There's a lot of ways that we can be looking at the conversation around sustainability, about looking at waste as a resource, but it being a positive aspect of this that maybe diverts some of the negativity that may be potentially coming this way in the conversations to come as such. One thing I did want to note, and sorry to bring it up here rather than an email, but I couldn't find this policy on either one of our policy pages or our strategy pages on the council website. If I could just flag that to council officers, if we could just follow up on that, whether we can just check that that is sitting where it needs to sit so people can access it, would be much appreciated. That's just more like a follow-up because the policy was only landed about a month and a half ago through council. But demolition waste is certainly a biggie here. In the conversations we were having yesterday around a submission into central government, demolition waste is huge. It's 50 to 60% of our waste as such, and our zero waste site is looking at creating some pathways to start tackling that. But I think that's something that also needs to come down from central government via legislation and how we walk into that. But also even the waste levy, making sure we're utilising that as that's coming in. I know that waste levy is going up, and the whole idea is that the money goes back into looking at ways that we can, or pathways we can develop. And I would mention that a front-end way to deal with this, I talked to the Healthy Homes concept. Kim, the Nahapu, used it with the Wananga build, being a very interesting kaupapa, if you like, around sustainable practice going into the project, during the project, and the benefits of it afterwards. And I'd like to see, personally, I'd love to see council stepping into that space as a leader. At the end of the day, the architect firm that used that process had never used it before. They came out the other side raving about it after being very sceptical about going in. And I think Nahapu are noticing some very interesting positive flow-on effects with regards to sustainability, but also dollar savings in that space as well would be worthwhile having a look at. things are moving here. Kapiti's in a good space moving forward, in our zero waste hub. But look, I also just wanted to comment on the council officers. We're very fortunate to have some very passionate officers in this space who are basically making magic happen on a shoestring budget. Tends to be the way on local government. So I just want to acknowledge that, chaps. You guys are doing great things, and the enthusiasm excites other people as well, which is absolutely fantastic. But looking at Jocelyn, you were talking about what we can do. Well, budget. It's always budget. But also, I think making sure we're capitalising on any funding opportunities that do come out of central government, making sure we are hooking into those where possible. It's been interesting with regards to the district-wide waste minimisation, but it's great to see a collaborative approach to this. And we're not going to have all our answers here. The idea is we're looking at regional solution with regards to this as well. And I think this is a really good step with regards to bringing that kaupapa together. But I think our officers are very well positioned to be seeing Company One represented in that space, but also looking at the opportunities to partnership so that we can maximise the things that we're doing, as well as offering leadership with regards to what's happening in that space too. That's about my bit. Sorry, bear with me for a sec. Oh, I just want to comment. I think the battery recycling, one of the issues for, I think, the mindset changes is we need those pathways for all those fiddly little things to be recycled. And I think the battery recycling expanding, I'd love to see that expand a lot further. It should just be a day-to-day thing. But we've got things like supermarkets, libraries, and that sort of stuff. Maybe there's other low-hanging fruit that we can be collecting items there as well. That's me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Halliday, for your detailed insights into this area, and that reflects how involved you've got in this and your passion. So now I'll move on to Mr. Moore for his questions, I assume, or comments.
Thank you, Councillor Jocelyn. I just want to bring up around this table in this subject the extraordinary work that's going on in Aotaki and Zero Waste Aotaki, and how that feeds into this, because that community group came out of a program some years ago in Aotaki and merged into this program. If anybody hasn't visited that site and seen what those volunteers are doing, it's quite phenomenal. I don't have the statistics in front of me of how much they're removing from landfill. They're purely concentrating on wood at the moment, but they are moving into working with construction workers and building builders in the Aotaki region at the moment. So it's a phenomenal site, and it's worked well within council and the managers of the land that they work under a peppercorn arrangement. But it's impressive, and it's making an enormous change to that community catchment area. So I think they built it on the Te Awamutu zero waste model, who do more than just wood. So I just want to acknowledge their work and kaupapa around this table.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. So I'll now move on to Mr. Black. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora tātou. Hey, thank you very much for this work. Look, love the work you're doing. This is just, I know this is the start. I try to recycle everything I can. Questions that I have is about education and comms and how we're going to get that out there. Last night I was with some friends for dinner, and I said, don't throw that battery out, give it to me. And they go, oh, I didn't know you could recycle batteries. So I go, yeah, you can go down to the library now. But they didn't know that. So I was just wondering, how can we get the education out there, get the kids to teach their parents, that sort of thing. We do. We've actually got our own. We've actually got our own a notice board outside the library anymore at the moment. So I think that's another good place to actually have it there. We were in discussion with our board and saying, look, we need a bit of graphics there to make sure that stands out and people actually want to read that notice board there. But I think, we need to get grassroots education out there and really make this a thing. Also join with, one of my big bugbears about Aotaki Zero Waste is that it's only open on Wednesday mornings. It's only said the last Sunday of the month or something like that.
Through the chair, if I may, please.
And so one of the things which I'd like to see is that if we can support them to actually be open at convenient hours, because I've got so much wood I want to take there, but I've never had the opportunity because Wednesday mornings are just out for me. And so what I think we need to do is look at the avenues of how we can get our waste to these places in a convenient manner. So that's my observations. Love what we're doing there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. So I'll just move on to Mr. Olsen now, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, on a similar vein on the battery recycling, I mean, we can see here that it has been a success and people do want to recycle. So I guess there's two things. One is there a plan to introduce in Waikanae as well? Because I know in Waikanae a lot of people ask me about that and they can't get to Papram, you know, the elderly and that, but they do go to there. So I think that doesn't take a lot of space up, and I think having a bin in Waikanae Library would make a big thing. The other thing on that as well is when I used to live in the UK in Devon, what we had there was we had a bag which we put all our batteries into, and then whenever we wanted to, when the glass recycling was done, we could put that bag in with the glass recycling, and they took it away and did it. Brilliant. And you know, if you bring it to the household, you're going to get a much bigger success of doing it. It's much more convenient. So I think, you know, so we could look at doing something like that where we can supply the households with a bag, and if they put it with the glass, and you know the contractors take it away, I think it would, you know, increase the amount of recycling tenfold. You know what we've got now. So thank you.
Great ideas.
Thank you for that, Glenn. So I'll just move back to Councillor Halliday, and then I'll make a few closing comments and some questions.
Yep. Look, one thing I did want to bring up around the Otaki Zero Waste is we're getting a huge amount of vandalism up there, and a huge amount of questionable behaviour as such there as well. So although I do appreciate what's been saying about expanding the operation, to be brutally honest, there should almost be consideration of shutting it down because it's costing the council a hell of a lot of money with regards to what's going on up there at the moment. So I just wanted to flag and air that. It was talked to me sort of off the record the other day, but I think that's something that does need to be aired as an issue. Up there, I don't know whether it's bright lighting around there. Recently, I think the tool shed for these guys, a volunteer organisation, got cleaned out. That's the nicest thing that's happening up there. There are some pretty repugnant things that are also happening up there as well. So just making the table aware of that situation. It's not all bells and whistles and roses. And that sort of stuff. We have got issues from members of our community, unfortunately, not really respecting the kaupapa that's going on.
Mr. Black, thank you, Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, just in response to that, Councillor Halliday, look, we've got continued crime issues, you know, and people coming into Otaki using it as a speedway. I think every time they try and put a lock on that container with all their tools, it just gets sheared off and stolen. We don't have enough CCTVs around or policing, so that's one of a wider issue, and I don't think closing depots down because we haven't got our crime under control is a good enough excuse, personally. Yeah, but I think we need, there's other issues we need to deal with there, I think, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Black. So thank you very much, David, Robbie, and Councillor Halliday for the work that you have done in this area. And obviously, this is a journey that we're on. And also thank you to the members of this committee for your questions and comments. So I suppose for me, it's great that we now have a plan, and you know there will be an information plan that comes along the way. But as has been raised around this table, it's about getting it out to our community for them to use it as well. And I think education is a really important thing. And I think even though that we're much closer in many respects to knowing what is available to us, we still probably aren't as up to date or as knowledgeable as we could be. And if we're in this position, our communities are probably even behind, well, a lot of our community members are probably even behind us. So I think, I don't know how you do the education, but I think it is something that we need to look at. I'm really interested in the demolition side of things, particularly when that is a high percentage of what goes into our landfill. And so, Robbie, I'm just wondering if, so obviously from what Councillor Halliday was saying, it is possible to reduce the construction that goes into landfill. And I'm just wondering whether we have a policy or whether one is in train, what education is in train for our construction industry to actually divert a lot of that construction from our landfills, because to me, this seems to be quite a big area that we could have a major impact on.
Through you, Chair, is it all right if I just touch on a few other things before that? On the education side of things, is we do have the zero waste education program in schools. It's delivered a relatively small number of hours by an officer in council, but we're currently looking to expand that by 20 hours a week to fund a zero waste education officer. So that is solely 20 hours a week to networking, establishing lessons, delivering that, also supported by Emma, our waste minimisation officer. So we are looking at expanding that education program in schools. On zero waste Otaki, they don't really want to scale up. It is 100% volunteer led. Otaonga Zero Waste is basically a sort of scaled up model with paid staff. We've made sure that Zero Waste Otaki are in the picture with that. We've if they need timber deliveries from the Zero Waste Hub, or they do get that. I've heard that they've bought some tools for Zero Waste Otaki, so we are working with them just as a smaller, completely 100% volunteer led satellite to a paid site. But as Martin said, the crime on that site, it's basically once or twice a week, and they lost all their tools last week. Over the last 6 months, I've started paying for security rounds, so it's visited twice a night. We've replaced cameras, then they go straight away. The whole transfer station site, it's look, we can replace their tools, but it's pretty upsetting for the volunteers. So we are, putting that out there so everyone's aware of the issues in that community. It's at least twice a week at the moment. Transfer station and Zero Waste Otaki vandalised or broken into. On the Waikano battery recycling, we will expand that. I think we're waiting for the new community centre. What's the reason, sorry?
Through the chair, it's in our roadmap, but the initial battery trial at Paraparaumu has gone really well, and it was always intended on the back of that initial trial success to expand it. Because we are ensuring that we deliver value for money in all that we do, we're working with an Auckland-based company called Upcycle, who are a really cost-effective option, and they've got all the paperwork to ensure that the batteries are properly recycled. But it just takes a little bit of manual handling, and some of the work we've been doing in the background is to be working with our libraries teams and upskilling them to, in effect, have them managing some of the process, so it doesn't require us to manually handle it as we've done at Paraparaumu. So watch this space, I think is the best message.
It's also really expensive, sort of on the curbside question. I've seen that model, it's really cool. But for us here, that's really limited. I mean, we're paying $180 for 25 litres of batteries. That's about right, eh? So limited options, high costs, that really is the limiting factor at this stage. On niche recycling, all the little bits and pieces, so batteries, bottle top lids, Tetra Paks, that's all things that we're looking at bringing in through the Zero Waste Hub. The site operators have the final call on that, but it is something that we're looking at as well. If that could be one central hub for all your little bits and pieces that get people really enthusiastic about recycling, that is intended to be included with that. And to your last question, Councillor Privanov, so C&D waste, at the moment for basically the lower half of the North Island, there's no end markets. There's actually no options other than small scale reuse. So Zero Waste Otaki are doing about 30 tonnes a year. So we need to explore those end markets, see what it is. I'm pretty confident that there are really good end markets, as you can see, on a small scale in Otaki to scale that up. But at this stage, there's no easy answers. No one really knows. Some places just shred it all and send it up north to be used as fuel, which counts as recycling. We'll explore those options too, but number one for us is establishing end markets for reuse of timber, a little bit of reprocessing, denailing, that sort of thing. The main thing we're pushing, there is no policy or legislation that says no C&D waste to landfill, but the price signals are working in our favour here. Obviously, with landfill prices going up, the waste levy going up, the transfer station prices, if there's a cheaper option for timber, even if it's 50% of a landfill gate rate, that in theory should be all you need to encourage at least a significant amount. Also, the direct networking through that, working directly with developers. So the Zero Waste Hub could offer that whole service from start to finish. So the plan, actually accepting the material, then selling it out the door again. Thanks. That was all my comments.
So appreciate you and David for the updates on some of the questions that have been raised around the tables here. I have to admit, I'd like to dig a little bit more into this construction recycling area. So you're saying that there's no markets, and I suppose I'm interested to know what type of materials are coming out of that construction and whether it's actually demolition. Well, I suppose there's probably two parts to it. One is the demolition side of it, where things are being pulled down, and then there's builds where there's offcuts for bits of wood and various other bits and pieces. So, there are places around where, you've got window frames and doors and bits of wood like you have at Otaki. But, I'm just trying to, understand this a bit more in terms of, potential markets, because to me, this is something I feel that, maybe we can, be a leader in this field, this council.
Through you, Chair. Sorry, there was a key part of that last question that I missed as well, in terms of policies and regulations. The other councils have set a $2 million threshold in the solid waste bylaw. So any developments at the building consent stage with an estimated value above $2 million have to submit a C&D waste plan. We need to set that threshold. We're just working on that, getting some legal advice about how we actually approach that, whether it needs consultation or not. So we need to set that threshold to align with the rest of the region. So that is probably, outside of that, we're looking at sort of, voluntary, the good ones coming forward, showing that it's cheaper, but also working on the bylaw and whether and how we implement that here. On what sort of materials are actually coming out, it's astounding. The quality of materials is really good, and it's going to landfill. Developers or construction companies have a full trailer at the end of the job. They just need to go to their next job. So it's landfill, pay the transfer station fee, and then pass that cost on. We can visit site once it's sort of a bit more well established. It'd be really nice to have everyone there, and you can see the materials that we're getting out. I mean, the first load was dropped off 2 weeks ago, just under a tonne, and there were full lengths of timber in there, like 2.4 metre lengths of framing timber that were perfect. So that was about to go to the landfill. So I think once site's sort of set up and it's full with timber, it'd be really nice to have everyone there, and you can see what sort of stuff we're talking about. And it's quite eye-opening, the quality of materials that are coming through there.
So just another question. I know that Councillor Halliday's got another comment or question. So do you think that these builders are, taking it to the landfill is an easy option for them? They're not actually really thinking about how else they could use it? Even if it's, and I suppose they're charging the cost to the client rather than.
Yeah, exactly, and just pricing jobs from scratch. And potentially over ordering a little bit, but then you just got to clear it. I'm sure there's good ones that have some consolidation or reuse points, but from what we're seeing coming through, it's everything left at the end of the job is chucked in a skip. That's the other thing, is on-site skip bins as well that just take everything from people's lunches, cans, plastic bottles, to concrete, jib, and timber. We've got a local operator that hand sorts those skips, and they're one of the main providers of recycled timber. But working with developers for on-site separation has been shown to be one of the sort of key ways to improve diversion as well. There seems to be a really keen interest, and people are keen, but it just has to be easy. It has to be affordable, which is, the goal of everything we've been working on.
Thank you for that. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, look, just commenting on that. I was having a chat to the chaps that were doing the recycling of the Living Building Challenge at the Wananga, as such. And one of the challenges they certainly found was finding the pathways for the materials. There's a lot of micro businesses out there who I think the deal that they made with a lot of them was, look, if we take your waste, would you purchase back the end product?
Yeah.
And just noting, councils use the boards around the community centre at the moment. They are from recycling. I think it's recycling all the scrunchies that goes into the supermarkets. So I think council being able to use its procurement processes to perhaps look at supporting some of these fledgling businesses that are perhaps coming out with new products from a recycling perspective, I'm sure would be very, very helpful. Another interesting point they made too is, and I think Robbie's hit on it quite nicely, is look, it's easy to chuck stuff in a skip and get rid of it. It's as simple as that. It's more cost effective. And until it's not more cost effective, that'll just continue to happen. But the other thing was, part of the process that they used up at the Wananga is they actually got all the tradies to buy into the concept of recycling everything. But the key thing was not having the tradies do it, because tradies cost a lot on an hourly rate. And if you've got them sorting through that sort of stuff, so you needed to have a system in place that collects this, and they ended up making their own little trolleys and bins and that sort of stuff, and just chucked it in, and they had this one person who would just go around, collect it all up, take it back to a key point and sort it as such. So really interesting to see that you know, we've got the process going with regards to $2 million threshold jobs and that sort of scenario. I dare say that that's going to trigger a lot more compliance potentially. But if we've got pathways for people or options for them to consider with regards to, oh, this has been done and this works, and we can just drop some templates on people to, I guess, help enable them to make this. Otherwise, everyone's trying to reinvent the wheel each time they go through this process. Would be very, very helpful. Just something to consider, I guess, as part of that process as well, as such. Because there's a will to do it, I think. It's just creating the simple pathways to make it happen.
So thank you, everyone. So on page 9, we have 2 recommendations which are to note this plan and to note the updates of progress. I would actually like to add another recommendation, and I think it would be useful to probably adjourn to sort out the wordings in particular, but I'd like to add a recommendation that looks at asking for a report on the demolition and construction pathways for waste. So if we can just adjourn now for 5 minutes to sort out the wording on that, and then we can see whether or not there is a seconder for those. Thank you.
I don't know that it falls under the delegations of this committee to seek a report like that. Maybe you should get some advice on that first.